This is the Bible Ranger. This is Evolution versus Creation. I think it's part 3, episode 87. What about all that evidence supposedly of the cavemen? Well, we're going to check that out. All right, this might sound a little harsh, but there's lies, propaganda, and willful ignorance when it comes to teaching the theory of evolution. Creation does not get an equal footing, okay? And let's talk about willful ignorance first. Basically, when man does not want to do something that God tells him to do, he does not want to be accountable to God, he comes up with something else, another God that he wants to serve, or a theory, or that God does not exist, okay? And in the future, I will show you evolutionists that actually tell you this, that we don't want to believe in God, okay? And all these verses support that in the Bible. Several verses in there. Now, propaganda. Now, this is cartoons all the way from 1940s that the kids have seen and adults have seen, okay? And a lot of them are entertaining, I understand, like Fred Flintstone, okay? Awesome cartoon when I was a kid, right? But it still shows you, and it puts this in the kid's mind that cavemens are there, we were cavemen. And it's like drop by drop, you know, and it just, this does a little part, the textbooks do another part, teachers do another part, and it all adds up together. Now, lies. They do lie in textbooks, okay? There's things that have been disproven decades ago, and they still leave it in there. And they talk about a belief or an opinion or a theory, and they act as it is fact. That should be as it is fact. Now, when I was a child, you know, I wasn't saved, but I believed in the Bible, and I believed my teachers were teaching me the correct things. So all I can do is put it together, and I'm like, oh, I got it. Adam and Eve, they were cavemen. That's what I used to believe. All right, now everybody makes mistakes, okay? But when a quote-unquote proof of evolution has been disproven, why are they still being used today in the textbooks? Now let's take Lucy, for instance. She's like the first link in the supposedly missing links, okay? She was found in 1973. I think it was Dr. Leakey, I think. 40% of the skeleton was found. It was about 3 foot tall. The skull was damaged and could not be put together, okay? The knee joint, it was what supposedly made it special because it was angled. It was an angled femur, and I'll talk about that in a second. But it was found 1.5 miles away from the Lucy skeleton. Not only that, but it was found 200 feet deeper. They're all into the levels of the earth, which we'll talk about that in the future, okay? But it was, according to their own way of doing things, it was contradicting themselves. But no feet were found. But yet, when they're drawn out in textbooks and they're drawn out in the zoo, the St. Louis, is it St. Louis? Yeah, St. Louis Zoo, they always put human feet on it, which, who's going to check this? Nobody checks this, okay? So when you see, it's like, oh, it looks pretty human. Human feet, human hands. It's just a little bit monkey looking, but it's us, okay? But this excavation, it was funded on a grant. And when there was only 2 weeks left, is when they found the miraculous angled femur. I say that screams bias, and many experts says that was just a chimpanzee. Sometimes they have extinct chimpanzees, but either way, chimpanzee. All right, the next one is Nebraska Man. And you know, this might not be in particular order, okay? So just remember that. So Nebraska Man was found in 1922. Scientists found one tooth, and this tooth was very interesting. And they said, wow, look at this tooth. This is incredible. The jaw must look like this if the tooth looked like that. And if the jaw looked like this, the skull must have looked like this. And then if the skull looked like this, then this is the way the body looked. And then they made him a wife out of this one tooth. And then, as excavating some more, they found that tooth belonged to a pig. Incredible. Now, you know, like I said before, you know, mistakes are done, okay? But when you keep these mistakes in the textbooks for decades after being disproven, it's a lie. It's propaganda. There's no question about it. Peking Man, the next person. Supposedly Peking Man was 500,000 years old according to evolution. And wow, look at that. All the evidence has disappeared. Incredible. How disappointing is that? The next one is Piltdown Man. Piltdown Man, 1912. Watch this. It was validated. Let me see if I can get this ink thing to work. It was validated by leading scientists, and guess what? It was a hoax. Unbelievable. They filed the teeth now of an orangutan to make it look more human, and they found a human skull, and they stained them both to make them look old, and then they married them together. So this proof that was a hoax was in the textbooks for years. They might still be there. The next one is Neanderthal Man. So in 1856, he was discovered. It was mistaken for a stooped down ape-like looking creature. Okay, but they found out after examining it well, there was a man that was suffering from kytosis, which basically means hunchback. So it was not a missing link. They found out that his brain was actually 13% larger because of the capacity of his skull, and we're supposed to be getting smarter according to evolution, not dumber. So that's against them. Now they reconstructed from his bones, they reconstructed his misaligned skull, and I'll tell you what that means in a second. They took it to 12 different artists, and basically the same skull, they came up with 12 different interpretations. Now watch this. Now these are the 12 down here, and this one here in the middle seems to me looking the most human. And you got some of them that look kind of like a monkey, like that one right there. So that's a big variation in just the artist alone. It's basically, it's like the artist saying, how do you want them to look like? You know, you put enough hair, you know, make them exaggerate a few features, and you can change them quite a bit, as you can see. Then came a doctor called Jack Caruso. He was a dentist by trade. So he was an expert in the jaw, in the teeth, and all that. And he wrote a book called Buried Alive. He was allowed to examine these bones. And he took the bone here of Neanderthal Man, and after examining it, he noticed that this misaligned bone was 1 inch out of socket. That's like a broken jaw. Okay, and it appeared to be more ape-like because it stuck out. And they weren't very happy with him, so they actually put a hit out on him. It did not succeed, okay, but he died, I think, 2005 or so. So Neanderthal Man was probably a long-living person after the flood. I'll explain that in a second. It seems like after, the bones don't stop growing. They're always changing depending how much stress you put on the bones. But the eyebrow bone area, when you're about 80 years old, they start to protrude out a little bit. You just don't notice it until you get older. And so if you're, before the flood, you're 900 years old. And after the flood, the age diminished. It went to 400, it went to 300, it went to 200, even 100. And we have a little story with that. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, when he was seeing the Pharaoh with Joseph in Egypt, Pharaoh, you know, he looked like an extremely wrinkled old man. He said, "How old are you?" And his answer was very curious. His answer was, "If you think I'm old, you should have seen my forefathers." And he was about 120, 130, Isaac. Don't remember exactly off the top of my head. So this is still being used as proof when it's not proof at all. And so I'm saying that these skulls that you see the eyebrow protruding are very old people from right after the flood. All right, let's skip Cro-Magnon for right now. Let's go to Astrolopithicus Africanus. Basically, they found a baby gorilla skull, and they basically made it look more human than it should. You notice there's a kind of a reconstruction right here, and they could have shaped that the original way it looked. It could have been like this. But skull changing is not a really big deal. You see it all the time. Every puppy that you see, they start out kind of like a dome-like head, and depending on the breed, the snout will come out longer, wider head, or whatever. Skull changing is not a really unusual thing. Okay, so let's go up to Cro-Magnon again. Now, basically, they look like us. So there's no proof there. That's not even worth mentioning. Now, there's millions and billions of humans, okay? And there's millions of monkey-like chimpanzee-type creatures. And in between is just a few questionable-looking bones. That's all it is. There is no proof. However, when you have people like National Geographic having a ape-like creature on their cover, it's got to be true, because you know, why would they do that? Okay, and then you have public schools teaching this. And then you have in cartoons, when you when you're a child, you're watching all these caveman cartoons, and then you have professors giving you tests, and if you want to do well in your tests, you kind of have to give them their answer they want, and then you have government support and grants for these evolutionary type teachings. And if you're a Christian, they're gonna wean you out of that because you don't want to do it, first of all, and they want people that are kind of disciples of theirs. Then you have these TV programs like the History Channel. It's a lot to fight, okay? And it's just you have to know your stuff a little bit. So I'm trying to help, trying to do my part. So this teaching of evolution is being held together, believe it or not, by faith. They use a lot of propaganda, all types of people, books. They have a lot of connections, a lot of money out there for it. There's a lot of indoctrination, and they have an agenda. They don't want to believe in God, okay? And this skull here is what I was talking about. When you get old, if you have an older person, they'll have thick-looking ridges. And this, as a skull, this could flatten a little bit too. Skulls are known to change. Bones, all bones are known to change depending what kind of stress you put on them by the muscles. So if this man has a job, a business that's bending down a lot, the neck muscles are pulling back from their skull, and it's going to cause some kind of change. Of course, they start slowly, but if you continue to do it, it gets bigger. The change gets bigger. Like bones from Australians, from indigenous ones, I forgot what the name of it was, but they use their jaws a lot as a tool, as a vice. They don't have any toolboxes carrying around. They're making their tools, and their jaws are thicker. And because they have to clamp down, their skulls they have a little bit of ridges too. Now, I kind of said this, but your skull, depending what your job is, what you work out as, if you're a weightlifter or you're a person who rides a lot of bike or has a particular physical skill, your bones are gonna adjust to whatever you're doing. I mean, look at this man. Obviously, he's an athlete. He looks pretty strong just by looking at him. He looks pretty well-built guy. Look at the ridges on his eyes. I mean, that could easily be one of the missing links. You see, we have people that look like this all the time. I mean, this guy's got a real thick-looking jaw, okay? And he's probably put a lot of stress on his bones to get into shape like he wants to do for his particular job. So this is not unusual to see bones like this. Missing links are not scriptural, okay? Neither is any type of caveman or even dinosaurs living before man. Because if you believe the Bible in Romans 5:12, it says that when man, talking about Adam and Eve, when they sin, then death came into the earth. So if dinosaurs and man are millions of years ago, there's tons and tons and tons and tons of bones way before Adam and Eve, which wouldn't make any sense, which is against the Bible. And if Lucy supposedly was 3.5 million years ago, according to evolution, there would have been tons and tons of deaths, right? However, we know that Jesus, being the second Adam, he paid for our sins, but we have to become believers. We have to follow him, okay? I know I made a comment earlier that I believed in the Bible, but I wasn't Christian yet. Well, you can believe stuff about the Bible stories, but I hadn't decided to follow the Lord until I was 15 years old. And I probably was about 11 or 12 when I was trying to figure out, how can cavemans be there and Adam and Eve? I don't understand. They must be cavemen then. So follow Jesus. It's not that difficult, but you have to live a life like what he wants you to do, not what we want to do. All right, so hopefully this was very helpful to you, and I try to make it as short as I could. And partner up with me if you would, and subscribe. I need one more for the 100th subscriber. That'd be really nice. Thumbs up. Thank you for staying all the way through, and please share it, especially with the young adults. They really need it. This is the Bible Ranger, keeping the Bible simple yet rich in content. Thank you very much.